everyone, I'm back. In one of my last videos, I redesigned Disney princesses the way they were described in their original fairy tales, and you seem to really like it. So in this one, I'll be drawing some more Disney princesses that you've also suggested. A huge shout out to Lavender Towne who inspired this video's thumbnail and concept. Please check her out after this if you haven't already. I think it goes without saying that this video will contain spoilers for both the movies and the corresponding fairy tales, so you have been warned. First princess we're redesigning this time is Rapunzel. I absolutely adore the movie Tangled. From the songs, the scenes, the story, and Rapunzel herself, I just really like it. But when researching her, I ended up going down a bit of a rabbit hole. You see, it's probably pretty known that Rapunzel is based off the German fairy tale Rapunzel from the Brother Grimm. But then you dig deeper and you find out that they supposedly based their tale off of a French one called Percinette by Charlotte Rose de Comont de la Force. But she apparently based her tale off the Italian Petruzinella by Giambattista Basile, and it said that he was inspired by the Irish Ethne, or whatever it's called, or the Italian Saint Barbara, who may have been a real person. So those were a lot of different stories. Very confusing. I wouldn't be surprised if I got something wrong here. But basically, the movie Tangled is based on a German fairy tale, which is based on a French one, which is based on an Italian one, that then may have been inspired by historical figures that may or may not have existed. Anyways, since it was so hard to know which one the original Rapunzel story would have been, or when it was still a completely different person, I decided to mix elements mentioned in the German, French, and Italian versions I've mentioned above. All of them start more or less the same. Rapunzel's mum saw really endearing parsley or Rapunzel plants in the garden of the neighbor, who was either a sorceress or an ogress, and she or her husband started to steal some every day until they were caught. The ogress/sorceress made them promise to give her their future child, which, when it was born, had a fine sprig of parsley on her chest, and she would take and lock her up when Rapunzel was 12. With that being said, one of the first things you probably noticed in the drawing is that Rapunzel has her hair in 2 long braids, unlike the movie, where we've only seen her with 1 or loose hair. It's been described as a ladder multiple times, and some versions have phrases like Petruzinella put her head out of the little window and let loose her tresses in the sun. In the son of a prince saw those 2 golden banners. Since a tress is, quote, a long lock of a woman's hair, we can assume that her hair was curly, or at least wavy. Since she has her hair in braids, I decided to show that by making her baby hair? I think that's the name, but yes. By making her baby hairs kind of curly. Her face was also described as a siren's face, and since sirens have very sharp features, at least in my mind they do, I tried making her face quite angular. I really struggled finding out from what time period she was supposed to be, especially considering all the different versions that exist, with some saying that the correct time period must have been around the 19th century, while others state that it was way back in the 13th century, and everything between those dates. That's quite a big difference. I've decided on the 13th century though, since Saint Barbara was supposedly born mid-13th century, which was the fixest period in time I could find. The clothes women would wear back then were quite loose and modest, often wearing a slim belt across their belly. I played around with giving her a veil, but it ended up looking strange since she had a lot of hair, and why cover it when it's such a focus of the story? So now she has a circlet, which is that round ring of metal, which she is wearing on her head. Also, if you're wondering why you can see my VTuber down in the left corner, that's because I was streaming me drawing her, and I may or may not have lost the file I recorded separately. Tales end a bit differently, but in the Grimm's version, Mother Gothel finds out that Rapunzel has been seeing a prince and cuts off her hair and abandons Rapunzel. She did that whole tricking the prince thing as well, but in shock he jumps out of the tower, and while he gets away with his life, his eyes have been destroyed by brambles. He wanders for years until he finds back to Rapunzel, and just like in the movie, her tears have healing powers and healed the prince's eyes. I drew her laying her hands on her belly, protecting it, since she was pregnant with twins in this version, which had been born when the prince found back to her. Next up we have Aschenputtel, or well, she's better known as Cinderella I suppose. And this time I only had to research 3 different fairy tales. I decided to draw her as her regular servant self for this video, but who knows, maybe if I do something similar again, I could also draw her the way she looks when she went to the ball. Her story starts by telling us what a good child Aschenputtel was, and that after her mother died, she went to her grave every day and cried. Her father remarried a year later, and her abusive stepmother and 2 stepsisters moved in, taking away her stuff, putting her into dirty clothes and sending her to the kitchen, where she'd had to work all day long, and wasn't even allowed to sleep in her own bed, having to instead rest in the ashes next to the stove. Her stepfamily would bully her and sometimes poured peas and lentils into ashes to make her sort them out of it, which is why I made her hold a bowl of peas. Luckily enough, these different fairy tales described her pretty similarly, although they couldn't seem to decide if Aschenputtel had an old ashy grey skirt or dress, although I ended up just giving her a dress thingy. They also mentioned her having wooden shoes, so I gave her some. Anyways, there are some more variations to what happens for Aschenputtel to go to the ball, but in some Aschenputtel wants to go, and her stepmother tells her she can, if she managed to sort out the lentils from a bowl of ash within 2 hours she could go. Aschenputtel then calls out to all the birds to help her sort the good and bad lentils out of the ashes, and with that help they managed in an hour. I don't know how big these bowls are, but an hour still feels like a while. Anyways, her stepmom refuses to let her go. Everything repeats itself, but now she has to sort out 2 bowls in 1 hour, and manages to cut the time in half once more. But surprise, surprise, her stepmother doesn't let her go. In some versions her godmother helps her out, and in others it's a bird, which has been hinted at that it was either sent by her dead mother or she herself. White pigeons have also been mentioned multiple times throughout the story, so I made sure to draw one on her head. I also made her hair really messy, and since her hair color wasn't described, I went straight to making her a brunette, especially since there are nearly no brown-haired princesses in Disney, and when fairy tales mention hair colors, they're normally dark or golden. I also made sure to cover her in ashes, which is how the tale described her since she sleeps and works in them. Also, fun fact I guess, Asche in Aschenputtel means ash, while Puttel supposedly means something like dirty kitchen boy or girl, so the ashes are literally in her name, or well, at least in the name her stepfamily gave her. Our last and final princess is probably also the oldest official Disney princess. Any guesses? Correct! Or not, I have no idea if you even guessed at all. Anyways, it's Sleeping Beauty, also known as Briar Rose, Aurora, or Dornröschen in the fairy tales. In the Disney movie, 3 good fairies blessed Sleeping Beauty with 1 gift each. First song, then beauty, and before the last one blessed her, the evil fairy Maleficent showed up, and in her anger that she wasn't invited, she curses Sleeping Beauty, saying she'll prick her finger on the needle of a spinning wheel and die before the sun sets on her 16th birthday. The last good fairy uses her gift to alter the curse, making it so that Sleeping Beauty falls into a deep sleep that she can be awoken from with a true love's kiss. The fairy tale itself plays out quite similarly. This time there were 13 wise old ladies, of which only 12 were invited because they only had 12 golden plates? I know, even 5-year-old me found this to be rather odd, but oh well. Anyways, same thing here. 11 people give Sleeping Beauty gifts. Sad 13th lady curses her, and the 12th saves her. But this time it's stated that she'll fall asleep for 100 years instead of dying. I don't think a kiss is even mentioned. Anyhow, I surprisingly did find some of her characteristics described in the fairy tale. First of all, we know she's 16, not counting the 100 years she slept through. Oh, my voice is so dying. First of all, we know she's 16, not counting the 100 years she slept through. And she was, well, very beautiful. In both the movie and the fairy tales, her father, the king, plans all spinning wheels, eagerly trying to protect his daughter. But while the tale just describes her pricking her finger on an old lady's spinning wheel, and her and the entire kingdom then falling asleep, the movie goes out of its way, hiding Sleeping Beauty away, not even telling her she's a princess. She then meets a prince in the woods, and shortly after gets taken away to her castle on her birthday, where Maleficent, hypnotizes her, and she pricks herself on a spinning wheel. Her cheeks were carnation, and her lips like coral. Carnation is a type of flower, so I made sure to draw those delicately flushed cheeks in such color. For the coral lips, I just based myself off the colors that appeared when I googled those exact words. She's also described to have big, beautiful blue eyes, white skin, and is supposedly as beautiful as milk and roses. I did my best to implement all of those characteristics of her. I also made her hair white since she's like 116 years old, and because no color was described. The Disney film makes the prince go through this whole adventure where he gets trapped and fights Maleficent when she's in a dragon form. But in the fairy tale he just walks right into the castle and it brambles from flowers. And that after many have tried to do so over the past 100 years. I guess he was just in the right place at the right time. I tried drawing Sleeping Beauty as if she had just woken up and stretching. The prince describes her clothes like this when she wakes up. The princess was already fully dressed and in most magnificent style. As he helped her to rise, the prince refrained from telling her that her clothes, with the straight collar which she wore, were like those to which his grandmother had been accustomed, and in truth, they in no way detracted from her beauty. While the movie constantly reminded us that it's supposed to play in the 14th century,
now, Father, you're living in the past. This is the 14th century.
I found that these straight colors seemed to more be a characteristic of the early 15th century. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong though, but I tried basing her clothes off of that time. There was supposedly also a glow radiating from her, filling the entire room with light, which I also tried to incorporate. Oh, and Sleeping Beauty's fairy tale had this whole story about the prince's mother being an ogress and trying to eat Sleeping Beauty and her 2 children after she and the prince got married. Anyways, I hope you liked the video. Thank you Iago Paulu and Anonymous Ko-Fi supporter for the donations. And thank you so much everyone that made me fan art. It's so lovely to look at. If you too would like to appear in the end of my next video, you can help me save up for university on Ko-Fi or send me fan art on Discord or email. Thank you for watching.